Before we talk about the future, I'd like to take you back 25 years. I had recently received my master's degree from here at the University of Delaware and was starting my work at FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency. I'd like for you to think about all of the change in technology that's occurred since then. In 1999, I was one of many who did not yet have a cell phone. FEMA gave me a pager to wear so that they could contact me. Over half of the adults did not use the internet, and we still used paper maps if we were driving someplace that we'd never been. Scientists had not yet fully sequenced the entire human genome. Now I'd like for you to think about the disasters that have occurred since then. 9/11. FEMA became part of the new Department of Homeland Security. We experienced two of the deadliest hurricanes in US history, Katrina and Maria. A pandemic, 8 of the largest wildfires in US history. I share these few examples with you because as we focus our attention on the imagined disasters of the future, it's important for us to collectively think about all that can and will change in the next 20 to 30 years at an even faster pace than we've seen in previous decades. FEMA's mission of helping people before, during, and after disasters hasn't changed, but our operating environment has transformed. We're seeing an increased risk landscape and more that's being asked of us as emergency managers. In 2023, we broke the record for billion-dollar disaster events, a record that we set in 2020. On average, the number of billion-dollar weather events over the past 5 years has increased 130% over previous decades. Left unaddressed, these challenges pose unacceptable risks to us as a nation and to us as emergency managers. So the question before us is, how do we pack for a trip to, say, 2050 if we don't know where we're going? How do we plan if we don't know what to expect? How do we prepare for the unknown? Recently, all of FEMA's senior leaders came together to ask ourselves these questions and to think about the future. We dealt with a range of scenarios that forced us to deal with the implications of these uncertainties on the future of FEMA's mission and on the field of emergency management. How would we relocate a sudden increase of climate refugees forced from their homes due to sea level rise or due to water scarcity? How would we close the gap if the insurance industry failed? What failures to critical infrastructure systems could result from advances in technology such as artificial intelligence? How do we prepare for the unknown? Although we can use history and experience as our guide for future events, and we can use trends to help us think about potential scenarios, our success in the coming decades will depend on our ability to prepare our people and our organizations to rapidly conduct analytics, innovate, and share information. And given the challenges, the complexity of the challenges that we face, and the growing distrust of public institutions, we are going to need to partner in new and different ways. So I invite you today to help us think about uncertainty and how we navigate it with adaptability and resilience. History will be our guide for what future events may occur. We know that whatever may come we will probably have seen in some form before, whether that's a health emergency, infrastructure failure, earthquake, hurricane. Where we need to use our imagination is understanding the threat landscape. What are the social, environmental, technological, political, economic contexts that will drastically shape the scope and scale of the impacts that we face? As an example, I recently spent a year and a half building an almost $4 billion program to compensate those that have been impacted by the largest wildfire in New Mexico's history. The fire started as a prescribed fire on federal land and burned out of control, burning over 340,000 acres, mostly on private land. Due to the federal government's role in the event, Congress asked us to go beyond traditional disaster assistance and compensate those who had been impacted. If we look back over 20 years ago, Congress had asked FEMA to do this before. For the Cerro Grande fire, also started as a prescribed fire on federal land, had similar circumstances. Great, I thought, I have a playbook. Except, this fire was much larger. Drought conditions and increased fuel from decades of fire suppression mean that wildfires are burning hotter and longer. Those impacted by the Cerro Grande fire were mostly middle income. Many were insured. This fire affected rural northern New Mexico in an area that was mostly low income and affected people who had been living off the land with their families for hundreds of years. It impacted their way of life, and they were already largely distrustful of the federal government. So I didn't have a playbook. I had a point of reference. I had some general framing, and I had to construct a completely different operating model. We had to listen and learn. We had to take risks. We needed to completely build a program quickly that we could then use analytics to adapt. And what if the fire had not occurred on federal land? Our federal disaster assistance programs were not ready to address those needs. So as we think about this changing threat landscape, FEMA is using the practice of strategic foresight to help us think about the opportunities and the threats and help inform our strategic goals through 2030. Strategic foresight is a multidisciplinary approach that looks out 20 to 30 years and helps us think through various options and trends that traditional planning processes may miss. It uses collaborative processes, targeted research, and creative mindsets to think about all of the potential pathways that we as a society might take, and then brainstorm the resources, the capabilities, and the actions that we need to take along the way. So as we talk about the future of disasters, I'd like to just share some of the trends that we're seeing as part of these efforts. First, I want to talk about climate. Our rapidly changing climate is affecting all dimensions of our lives: the environment, economy, infrastructure, our daily lives in communities. We can expect some expensive failures in infrastructure. Infrastructure is expected to bear the brunt of climate adaptation costs, estimated to be between 60 and 80% of total global climate adaptation costs. That could translate to $150 to $450 billion per year. We're going to continue to see issues with potable water. Extreme events are causing water to be more scarce, more unpredictable, more polluted, or all three. And we will continue to see flooding. Major flooding is expected to occur 5 times as frequently in 2050 as it does today. Although together with our global partners, we can significantly cut carbon emissions, we will not eliminate the impacts of climate change. That means that our work today and in the coming years to work for local planning, building codes, investment in resilience and mitigation in every investment that we make is going to be critically important. Now I'd like to share some of the demographic trends that we're seeing. We can expect a transformation of the US population over the next quarter century. Our population is getting more diverse, more educated, older, and more concentrated. Urbanization is spreading. 80% of the US population currently live in urbanized areas, and that number will continue to grow, increasing the demand on our infrastructure. The population is also getting older. Americans 65 and older, that number will double from 49 million in 2016 to 95 million in 2060. And we're continuing to see growing distrust of public institutions. Today, 80% of Americans say they do not consistently trust the government to do what is right. This has broad implications for how we share official guidance, warnings, and evacuation orders, and generally how we communicate with the public. We also know that more is being asked of us as emergency managers. From the increasing frequency of natural disasters that we're seeing to the evolving technological and human-caused events. Emergency managers in local communities are being asked to step out of their conventional roles of response and recovery and take on things like public health coordination, supply chain management, contested information, cybersecurity, and resilient community development. Society's modern problems are complex, interconnected, multidisciplinary, and multi-jurisdictional. And emergency managers are asked to step out of organizational boundaries and coordinate with a wide variety of players. And at the same time, we're facing staffing shortages. Although the expertise needed for the field broadens, we're seeing experienced emergency management professionals leaving the field. So all of these trends and issues may seem daunting, but I am an optimistic person at heart. And I know that together we can work through these challenges with adaptability and resilience and build that in our partners, in the nation, and all of the people that are doing this important work. So my challenge for you today is to think about how you can take these trends and these issues and integrate them into your personal work in disasters. How can you bring the practice of strategic foresight into your own planning so that you can think about what creative futures are possible and the actions we need to take between now and then? You each come from a different organization and have a different lens. And how can you share what you're seeing about the trends and the issues that are going to be important to our future? How can we together prepare for the unknown? Thank you very much.